My name is Marcus Thompson. I bought 50 acres to end an 8-year war with the most entitled woman in Tennessee, and right now I'm watching Linda Kramer have a full meltdown at my brand new steel gate. Her silver BMW stuck behind $200,000 worth of nope. The look on her face priceless, and I'll tell you, you don't need cash to buy that kind of satisfaction, but it helps. I swear to God, she's been treating my retirement land like her personal shortcut for almost a decade, and today that ends. I moved out here thinking retirement would be golf or fishing, not guerrilla property law, but life has a sense of humor. I just finished setting up a simple chain link around my little vegetable patch, the kind of thing you do. So deer don't help themselves to tomatoes when she showed up looking like a suburban mannequin with perfect highlights and a smile designed to sell extended warranties. Linda introduced herself as the HOA, President Willowbrook Estates' proud enforcer of lawn virtue, and immediately started lecturing me about fence color height and decorative post caps. I blinked because my 15 acres predate their subdivision by 15 years. But apparently chronology was optional where she came from. 2 weeks later, I got a certified letter $500 for the unauthorized fence, and a politely phrased warning that if I didn't change it, fines would multiply like rabbits. I called to sort it out, and her voice slid from sugar to ice in a blink. She offered to bring a surveyor. I, polite Midwestern transplant that I am, said yes, which was my first mistake of many, because she assumed I'd be the kind of retiree who'd fold under bureaucratic fury. Next morning, she showed up with a man and a tripod and measured my lawn like they were mapping Mars. She stood on my porch and declared my fence was on HOA jurisdiction, which sounded very specific until she couldn't actually show me a single document proving it. That night, I went to the county records like a man on a mission. I read deeds and maps until the clerk looked at me like I belonged in a museum, dusty paper and official stamps, a smell that should be illegal because it made me giddy. And then buried in development plans from 2003, I founded a temporary construction easement, explicit dated March 2003, with an expiration 18 months maximum. The development was certified finished in December 2004. That easement expired 20 years ago. 20 years. Do you hear me? 20 years of Linda cruising across my land at 7:43 a.m. every day like she owned a time machine that stopped property law from working. There were environmental reports, traffic assessments, everything saying the route was a temporary convenience, not a permanent road. And the HOA charter itself, their own lawyers had put in a clause saying any violation of easement agreements or trespass on non-member property could trigger removal of board members and even dissolution of the association's standing. Linda had been violating their bylaws, public records, and common sense day after day, and she'd been doing it in full view of everyone, including me. I left the courthouse with 21 pages that felt like legal dynamite. I could have filed a complaint, called the sheriff, and closed the book, but that would have fixed my problem, not the system she'd been abusing. I wanted a solution that would protect my land and prevent her from terrorizing the next neighbor who didn't know property law. So I looked at the map and saw an option that made my engineer heart sing control all access. There was a 50-acre parcel for sale adjacent to my eastern boundary raw land, strategic expensive. $200,000 more than I'd meant to spend on retirement. But I thought about leverage, like an engineer thinks about load-bearing walls. That property would control every deer trail, every back road, every shortcut Linda used. If I owned it, I could make the shortcut impossible legally and physically. It was a chess move, and sometimes you spend cash to win the game. I called the number on the sign. Jennifer, the agent, sounded surprised when an old guy said he wanted to buy undeveloped land without a pool or a sunroom. 2 hours later, I stood on a hill and saw the Hartwell parcel wrap around Willowbrook like a noose. I signed papers 3 days later. Closing set for Friday. 10 days to build a perimeter that would make Fort Knox look cozy. I spent the week hiring contractors in a way people spend retirement money on yachts. An 8-foot industrial chain link barbed wire, industrial locks, motion sensors every 100 feet, a camera system that could put a Netflix doc to shame, all permitted, all on my new property. Hartwell Monument made signs big enough to be read from low orbit. I was building more than a fence. I was building a legal statement. Linda responded the way entitled people do, with volume. She texted me before closing telling me to meet her at the property line at 8 a.m. This ends now. I showed up at 7:55 with coffee and my stack of county documents. She arrived in heels that could kill and a briefcase full of theatrics. Behind her, a nervous surveyor who would later learn that pocket-sized credibility is expensive to replace. She strutted onto my grass and announced we would resolve this like civil adults. I sipped coffee and told her calmly that she was trespassing. You should have seen the pause, like someone had pressed freeze on her authority. She pulled out a folder full of carefully prepared legal-sounding papers. Someone had paid to manufacture a myth, a glossy legal analysis claiming prescriptive rights, adverse possession theories, and community benefits. It looked impressive until I read my easement out loud from the county file and watched her color drain. She tried to argue that long usage creates rights. I explained gently, then less so, that Tennessee doesn't reward law-breaking with property titles. She called the county planning department, demanding recognition of a public access road. The county records man read his screen, sighed, and said no. Her surveyor looked like someone who'd realized he'd been hired for a magic show. The next week was escalation theater. She tried fake documents, new surveyors, bolt cutters, even hired men with crowbars to start dismantling my fence. I called my attorney Sarah smart, efficient, and a little terrifying in court, and she arrived like a storm. We documented everything. The sheriff showed up when bolt cutters met motion sensors, and the men left with work boots and a new respect for felony charges. Sarah made a call. I hadn't asked for a local reporter who liked corruption stories. A news crew showed up, filmed the crowbar incident, and when the story aired, people started calling. Other Willowbrook residents had stories of fines for nonsense of contracts steered toward friends of proxy votes that resurrected ghosts to support Linda's slate. The floodgates opened. State investigators read the county records and the HOA minutes and found a pattern: missing funds, sweetheart contracts, manipulated votes, a paper trail that smelled like smoke. The association's legal standing was suspended pending audit. Suddenly, every violation Linda had issued was invalid. Every fine collected might have to be refunded. The legal dynamite I dug up had detonated a bigger reality. This was more than one woman's commute. It was corruption worn like a badge. Criminal charges followed for destruction of property, the crowbar episode, and the investigation grew into financial and tax probes. Evidence suggested she'd used her position to funnel benefits to friends, massage contracts, and even tweak assessments for personal gain. The state receiver took over, the board was suspended, and homeowners were told to expect refunds and elections under supervision. Karma had a long memory and a precise aim. The satisfaction of watching that fall apart is hard to explain unless you've been lectured by someone who thinks authority equals ownership. The moral, if you want one bluntly, power without accountability breeds theft. Sometimes it takes knowledge, persistence, and, a stubborn willingness to spend retirement savings to make a point. Justice doesn't always come cheap, but it does come. What made me happiest wasn't the criminal charges or the refunded fines. It was what came after. The new board elected under supervision didn't want revenge. They wanted solutions. They worked with the county to fix the real problem that made Linda's shortcut attractive. The road needed a light and turning lanes. They negotiated a legal surveyed emergency access route across a small leased portion of my land with insurance, fair payments, and a proper contract. That lease became seed money for something better. I asked as a condition that the HOA use lease proceeds to fund scholarships for local kids studying engineering and law, young people who might not otherwise afford college. 2 students a year, full tuition, funded directly by the community that had nearly collapsed under corruption. We turned an expensive vendetta into a legacy. We also preserved habitat, a wildlife preserve along the creek, community gardens, and outdoor education center. A chunk of those 50 acres stayed fenced and monitored, a reminder that property rights matter. The cameras that once watched for trespassers now watch for poachers. Motion sensors protected turkey and deer, not just boundaries. Linda served time. She moved away when released. The new HOA sends meeting invites now instead of violation notices. Families use the garden, students get scholarships, and the road no longer tempts people to break the law for convenience. My fence still stands, sensors silent now because respect replaced trespass. The cost, $200,000, and a bruised retirement felt worth it when I saw kids learning where I used to watch deer. So here's the quiet lesson I want to leave you with, not as a sermon but as a hard-won truth. Knowing the law even a little changes the balance of power. Entitled people rely on fog, on confusion, on the assumption that most folks will give up. When you refuse to fold, you force accountability. You may need patience, a lawyer, and yes, sometimes money. but you might also turn a long nuisance into something that benefits an entire community. Now, I want to ask you, and this one's for the people who've had enough of small-town tyrants, when someone in your neighborhood thinks authority means immunity, what do you do? Do you fight or let it slide until someone else pays the price? Share a time. You stood up or wish you had, and tell me whether justice needs a price tag or if we can build systems that stop this before it starts. I'd love to hear your stories.